Bill Spindle, independent geopolitics and energy analyst over there in the United States of America, indefinitely extending the ceasefire but keeping the blockade. What's your read this morning, Bill?
Yeah, I think Trump needs a deal of some sort. Very reluctant to go back into any sort of a fighting mode. I wouldn't completely rule that out. He may try that again. He's really got to get to some sort of not a deal really, because that's just virtually impossible given the complexity of all these issues. But I expect at some point here in the next, week, 2 weeks at most, we're going to see a kind of framework agreement, and that framework is going to look a whole lot like the former JCPOA Obama deal, and then we'll see some sort of straits opening. I mean, that's the optimistic scenario, but we could go back to fighting. It's not unimaginable.
One of the sort of things I struggle with, Bill, is to be able to identify that the American position, the US, is under any real stress to get something done here. It seems like the American economy is generally still at, enjoying its hamburgers and cruise lines. War? What war? I mean, is this, I mean, I know that's in the chattering classes of Washington, but is this really a pressure story that Trump needs to solve?
Not quite yet, but we're getting very close. I think and the administration's done a great job of keeping the kind of trading community living in a near term deal is about to happen world, where things don't go back to normal, but they don't get any worse, and it's all kind of a fix up job after that. Well, even the underlying physical markets obviously are telling a different story. The clock is ticking. I think there is a reason, those two realities are going to come together at some point, and so far they're staving that off, but I don't think they can stave it off forever.
It certainly feels like he's kind of and that's the sort of strange moment in a way. Trump's world is not so stressed that he has to make a deal. And Iran's world is so stressed. I mean, they've been bombed for 8 weeks. They've lost $250 billion worth of infrastructure. They've been under sanctions for years. You can't punch them any harder. And suddenly that's the punch that
Yeah.
pushes them out into
Yes and
somehow.
no, because they've got a pain, the pain thresholds are different, is the situation. Yes, the situation you're describing where the US is doing fine, Iran is definitely under a crunch is true. On the other hand, the Iranian regime's pain threshold is far, far higher, and their willingness to sort of endure this, and almost eagerness to endure some of this, far exceeds Trump's ability to withstand the kind of electoral problems and the as the clock ticks towards real physical impacts, fuel scarcities, even in Europe, and gas going towards $5. Those are things that I just don't think the administration is willing to endure. Perhaps they are, but that's what they're looking at, and I don't think they believe that's a reality yet.
Just looking back to your earlier point, the geopolitics of this, you still think that there is potential within the US position that could go back to a hot war? I mean, all things being equal, obviously the outlier here, Israel, is in a temporary ceasefire of 10 days in their Lebanon war. Although Trump wasn't in great detail of whether his extended indefinite ceasefire includes the Israelis, but you your thoughts on, just sort of give us some further insight of where you think a pathway to a hot war within the sort of the political system of the US, midterm elections, etc.
Well, I think you've got the Donald Trump is a very capricious person who makes decisions on the fly, and so I don't think you can rule that out, because on the other side you've got the Iranians who clearly are not quite poking him, but really making clear that we're not going to just do whatever you want us to do or get into a position where it looks like we've just simply capitulated. So, it's hard to predict where that just winds up, and it could wind up with some more fighting. I think simply, though, I don't think so. I mean, I think there's a lot of impetus on both sides to get to some sort of a, again, not a deal because that's just impossible to reach in the time frame, you know, that the straits need to be opened. But a framework that, again, kind of resembles the Obama deal. Throw in some regional stuff that the Obama deal didn't include. Extend the timeline for no enrichment. That sort of leaves those things seem probably both sides could agree to mostly that. And then you've sort of got what's the status of the strait going forward.
Bill, I wanted to get your thoughts on the idea of where we go from here in terms of the can we settle? You mentioned in your earlier comment you expect something within 2 weeks. Is there we're 3 years into the disruption, the friction on the Bab el Mandeb in the Red Sea. Nothing ever fully resolved, nothing ever fully exploded, but ultimately a continuous friction. Your thoughts on where we go from here with this indefinite? Do we just have to live with a friction reality here?
Well, the friction in reality would be a more or less the opening of the straits under some sort of terms, temporary or otherwise. So, it's different, I think, than the Red Sea in the sense that, a physical supply shortage of what, 10, we're at maybe 10 to 15 million barrels a day now. Say it goes down to even 5 or 6 a day is going to cause a lot of problems. So I do think you're going to have to reach some sort of straight opening, and both sides want that. So, it's hard to believe that's not going to be where this winds up.
Both
But
sides want what?
getting there is
Sorry,
difficult.
you said
An
both
opening of the
sides.
strait. I think the Iranians need to sell their oil. The other oil needs to get out. The Gulf states want the strait. Everybody wants it open. It's just a question of whose terms do they open it on at the end of the day.
What about China, Bill? Does China have ability to put its thumb on the scales here?
Not much, I don't think, and I don't think they're interested in it. They're really, at this point, yeah, perhaps now that their stockpiles are starting to get down towards the end, and they'll have to go back onto the market and purchase more expensive barrels, but that's not a massive problem for them, I don't think, in the short to medium term. So, I think if your rival is sort of got themselves into a mess, why go in and bail them out in some fashion? And that I suspect is kind of how the Chinese are looking at it.